Nichole is from Homeschool Learning Partners. She's a licensed intervention specialist with a Master of Education degree. Nichole saw the growing need for an enriching home learning experience that supports students of all abilities and empowers parents to navigate the experience that supports students through their homeschooling journey with confidence. With her expertise and passion for individualized education, Nichole created a program designed to simplify the homeschooling process, providing families with the resources and guidance they need to foster an enriching and effective home learning program. So I will turn it over to Nichole, and thank you very much for joining us and doing our presentation this evening, Nichole.
Awesome. Hello. Can everybody hear me okay? Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you for the introduction. I am Nichole Grant, and like she said, I'm the founder of Homeschool Learning Partners. I'm a special education advocate and consultant, an educator and intervention specialist specializing in special needs homeschooling and compliance. So we'll go ahead and get started here. Lots to discuss and talk about. In this webinar, we're going to talk about how to homeschool, the considerations and obstacles during the homeschool process, ETRs and IEPs, what they are and how they might work for you, and of course, Ed Choice scholarships. So without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started here. And we will begin with the Ohio Revised Code. This Ohio Revised Code is what creates the guidelines for homeschool laws in Ohio. And Ohio is a really great state for parents wanting different educational choices for their students, for their children. You have the option to choose the best educational setting for your child in Ohio, and that includes homeschooling. The state supports school choice really fervently by allowing parents to provide instruction at home. There are certain guidelines, though, and requirements in place to ensure quality education. So we're going to go over some of those and just some things that you need to keep in mind when choosing to homeschool.
Dad.
So homeschooling begins with notifying your district of your choice to homeschool your child or your children. It is required that if your student is between the age of 6 and 18, because they are bound by attendance requirements for public school, you have to send a letter to your superintendent's office. You can deliver this letter by email, mail, or even in person. The letter should include the parents' names, students' names, your home address, the school year, and it should be signed and dated. And it should explain your intent to homeschool your children. You don't have to give more than an explanation that that's what you are doing. And then in accordance with our Ohio Revised Codes, the district superintendent shall respond with a written acknowledgement within 14 calendar days of receiving your notice. You'll want to keep that response from the superintendent's office for your records, whether it's a digital copy or the physical copy. You can keep that, just keep it in a file every year, and you'll probably start collecting those if you stick with homeschooling for several years. Homeschooling is a really wonderful option. It can provide an amazing individualized education for your student. As a parent, homeschooling, you really do have full control over the curriculum that you choose, the areas that you choose to focus on, the pace of your homeschool program, the pace that you move through the content with your kiddos. Because you are homeschooling, this allows you to make adjustments without any formal meetings or testing. You know your student best, and you can choose what's best for them and make those adjustments. Now, when designing your homeschool program, you really want to start with a solid vision and philosophy. You can also make a plan. Identify your child's strengths, their challenges, their learning style, and set some clear goals. You want to define some academic, social, and even life skills goals tailored to meet your child's needs. And then you can determine your style, possibly a primary and even a secondary style that you want to include in your homeschool program. This will really narrow down your options so that you can choose the right curriculum and resources. You'll want to select a flexible curriculum that matches your child's learning styles and their abilities and is going to support them in those challenging areas. You can plan hands-on and multi-sensory activities and even technology-based learning tools, incorporate those into your homeschool program. You can, in order to prioritize the emotional and social development, you can plan ways to foster social skills through play dates, community programs, and special interest groups. Supporting emotional well-being really does begin at home with your patience and encouragement and the positive learning environment that you create. It is also something that you can make work for you. You want to establish a consistent but very flexible schedule that balances structured learning with different breaks, including movement breaks, hands-on activities, self-paced learning. And as the leader of your educational program at home, you'll want to track progress and adjust when you see that that's necessary. You can keep records of the completed work that your students do, take progress notes, keep any assessments that you give them just for future reference and to compare their progress at different points in time. You can regularly evaluate what's working and then adjust your approach as needed. This is something that you can do daily, weekly, monthly, because you aren't bound by those meetings and all of the red tape that goes along with public school. It's also important to stay motivated. And I find that parents who build a support system have the most success with this. Connecting with other homeschool families and support groups or co-ops is really instrumental in building a holistic program. You can even utilize online resources and local organizations for guidance and community. Facebook is a really powerful tool for connecting with others. I have a lot of local groups that have been really great for some of our students' socialization. There's lots of field trips that are planned. Ohio has some very active homeschool groups, not only in Northeast Ohio, but across the state. And just to get together for those shared learning experiences. Every child learns differently, so definitely be open to adjusting your strategies as a homeschool parent and celebrate the small wins to keep you and your child motivated and engaged. And as rewarding as homeschooling is, there will be obstacles, and you might have seen some of those already. And they can be fairly numerous. So time management and energy management is a huge one that I hear from parents, and balancing things like teaching, the different household responsibilities, possibly working outside of the house or from home can create a challenge. So creating that flexible but consistent routine where you're using schedules and planners that include independent learning activities is going to be very impactful. There is an overwhelming number of curriculum options, and there's a little bit of uncertainty about what is the best approach for my child. Well, research different homeschooling styles based on your vision and philosophy. Keep going back to that vision and philosophy and choose materials that fit your child's learning style and needs. See what works for others. Use trial and error to find something that works best for you. And this is something that networking with other homeschooling families can be instrumental for. You'll want to incorporate that hands-on learning, field trips, gamified lessons, interest-based projects to keep that engagement high. And then, of course, ensuring that your child, if they have learning disabilities, anything like ADHD or other special needs, making sure they receive proper support is important. And of course, the socialization. That's a huge concern that we hear from parents, that they might not have enough social opportunities in the homeschool setting. But joining those homeschool co-ops, participating in community sports or clubs, and even scheduling regular meetups with homeschool families or joining those meetups can help to overcome that. And if you find yourself struggling with these or other obstacles, reach out to those other homeschool parents, network with professionals, give me a call and we can chat about it, if you're facing something that you're not sure how to get through. So we are going to kind of talk about the basics of the ETR and IEP at this point. There's a lot of technical information, but for this purpose with homeschooling, I think the basics will suffice. So an ETR, that is the evaluation team report. It is the initial step for identifying a disability and determining the appropriate educational needs of the student. The IEP is a written plan that outlines a student's educational needs and goals. It's designed to help children with disabilities succeed in school. So the IEP was created to support students with special needs in public schools. It would outline the steps to help them succeed in a large group setting. And to qualify,
Nichole, oh, I was gonna say, when you're done with the slide, I've got a question for you about the IEP.
got it. Awesome. Thanks. I do not do a good job watching chat, so that's very helpful. So in order to qualify, a student must score 1.5 standard deviations below the average in 2 areas, or 2 standard deviations below the average in 1 area on the ETR. And that is that multi-factored comprehensive evaluation. The ETR is the data that drives the IEP. So I'll pause for a question and then keep on going here.
Gotcha. All right. How do you update IEPs during the homeschool process?
Awesome. I will get to that. So that is on another slide. So I'm just going to hold that question for a few moments. All right. So one of the things is that homeschooling provides this amazing flexibility, and homeschool parents are very right to question whether an IEP is necessary since their child is no longer in a traditional classroom setting. And in many cases, an IEP may not be essential because parents can tailor learning to meet their child's needs. However, there is a financial benefit to keeping or obtaining an IEP, making it a really valuable consideration for homeschool families. And we're going to get into what those benefits are. And then I'll go over the protocol for maintaining those documents as well. So the benefits of using the ETR and IEP. ETR and IEP are a team. They go together. You don't necessarily have one without the other as a special education student. The ETR always comes first, and then the IEP comes after, follows that one. So homeschooling families with a child who has special needs can apply for Ed Choice scholarships. These scholarships are state funded. They cover therapies for the student that the student would have received in public school. They use tax dollars to pay for those therapies, and there's no out-of-pocket cost to families. The covered services that you can access through a scholarship does depend on the student's IEP, but it can include things like occupational therapy, speech therapy, physical therapy, even support from an intervention specialist or a behavior specialist. I've even seen things like music therapy, art therapy, some really cool options for kiddos. So here's where we'll get into some of the specifics. So starting this whole process, if you think your child may qualify for services, you would start by emailing the director of special education or a school psychologist, and you would make a formal request for an ETR, which is that evaluation team report, that multi-factored comprehensive evaluation that's going to see where your student is at cognitively. And they will even test some other areas as the speech and language and communication, occupational therapy, their fine motor, to see if occupational therapy is necessary, their large motor, and things of that nature. If let's see, where was I? In your request, you would want to explain that you believe your child qualifies for special educational services. And if you have a diagnosis or other relevant testing that you've had done, maybe at the Children's Hospital or through your doctor's office, you could include that to support your request. I do have example letters of to send when requesting an ETR. So if that's something you'd like, I'll share my email at the end and I can share that with you. Once a request is made, the school has 60 days to complete the evaluation. They have 60 days to complete the ETR, and that will determine eligibility. If your child qualifies, the district then has 30 days to develop the IEP. And these timelines are bound by law. So these timelines are set in stone at the federal level to expedite child find with students with disabilities. The thing with ETRs and IEPs is that you must consent to testing. If you do not consent to testing, you do not get an ETR. There is one exception for students with autism, which I'll discuss here in a moment. But just know, I think that was one of the questions that someone submitted early on, is that you do have to consent to testing. And that's done at the public school. Your district of residence would do that. All right. So
I got another question here,
yeah.
Nichole. Does the 30-day real work, maybe does the 30-day really work if you are adding something to the IEP?
Yeah, it's law that
Oh, rule. It's supposed to say rule. I'm sorry. Does a
okay.
30-day rule work?
So if you have an IEP and you'd like to add something to it, that does not necessarily go along with those rules. That is for completing an IEP after an evaluation has been completed, is that 30-day rule. There are laws concerning a parent's right, and this is with IDEA. There is laws concerning a parent's right to request an IEP meeting at any point in the school year, and they can actually request an ETR to be completed even if it hasn't been 3 years. So usually ETRs are completed once every 3 years, and IEPs are completed annually. As a homeschool student, I don't know that it's necessary to request additions to the IEP. There's some other avenues to have those things added, and a provider can help you with that. But yes, a school district should honor your request to have a meeting, but they are not bound by that 30 days in that situation. So after you have requested an ETR, you know that your child qualifies under a certain disability category in the ETR and is entitled to special education services, then an IEP is written. And that's when that's the timeline that they have 30 days to complete that. The next steps, and you can actually start doing this once you know they're going to write an IEP for your student, you start to find a provider. So in order to access the scholarships, this is the process that you follow. So you request those evaluations, an IEP is scheduled, and you start looking for a provider. Now, providers are private businesses approved by ODE to offer special education services. They are essentially private practices that offer therapy and intervention for homeschooled students with special needs. Now, some have large teams and provide multiple services in one location. Some will meet with you in the community or provide in-home support or even office-based tutoring and therapies. Since each provider operates differently, it's really important to check the details of the provider that you would like to work with and find one that meets your needs and your child's needs. The provider delivers then the agreed upon services. They would bill ODE directly for those services, so there is no cost to parents aside from your tax dollars funding the program. You'll want to do some research when you contact providers. Not all providers are made equal. You want to ask lots of questions to determine if the program is right for you. Not only the delivery methods and options that they have, but the different specialists and therapists that they're able to offer to your child. Your provider will send an application form to you and ask for proof of address, proof of residence in whatever school district you're in, and just being a resident of the state of Ohio. Those things are all submitted to ODE, and within 30 days, that is approved and you receive your funding award. This is when you can set up services and schedule those with your provider. You'll want to stay compliant, and that entails a couple of different things. So in order to stay compliant, you want to keep your legal documents such as an IEP and ETR current to continue with the scholarship. You'll want to attend the annual IEP meeting and the triennial ETR meeting. Those are done every 3 years. You want to complete state testing with your provider. We'll get more into those details in a moment as well, which each scholarship dictates state testing. And you'll want to renew your scholarship application with your provider every year and file that, submit that homeschool notification to your superintendent each year. And a quality provider will help you with these things. They will be your partner in these things. You should not be on your own navigating this whole system and kind of timeline for when and how to do things. So now that we've gone over how to utilize the services of the scholarship and kind of the timeline for doing that and how and getting that IEP and ETR can assist you in it, we'll go over the specifics of some of the scholarships, the two that are really pertinent for homeschool students. So the Ed Choice scholarships for homeschoolers, like I said, there's 2 of them, come through the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce through the Office of Non-Public Educational Options. And only one scholarship can be used at a time, depending on what they might qualify for both, but you have to pick one. Public school students are not eligible for the Ed Choice scholarships. Some private schools accept the scholarships as funding for, like, in place of their tuition or to pay towards tuition. They would have to become a provider through the Department of Education. So the scholarships cover special education services that are listed in Section 7 of your child's IEP. This includes support, like I said before, from an intervention specialist, which is a special education teacher, an occupational therapist, physical therapist, behavior specialist, speech and language pathologist, and it covers up to the amount of the scholarship funds that your child was awarded. It does not cover homeschool curriculum. It doesn't cover assessments or extracurricular activities. However, some providers offer benefits like events, memberships, supplemental programs. So that's another question you can ask when you're looking at providers is what kind of benefits do you offer my child if they were to be part of your program? Now, providers report student progress quarterly, and the District of Residence maintains the special education documents with provider input. Your provider will have everything organized so that they know when your IEP and ETR expire. The ETR expires every 3 years and it needs to be renewed, and the IEP is annually or every 1 year. So your provider will be in touch with you and your district, and then your district will also reach out to your provider. It's just a case of kind of who reaches out first within a month to 2 months before those expirations, and they will initiate the communication that's necessary to renew those documents. Any questions on that? Nothing coming up? Okay. And I can certainly take questions at the end. It's a lot of information. And I'm certainly here to help if you guys have any other questions, if anything comes up. So the scholarship amounts are based on your child's disability category. The award amount is for 1 fiscal year. Their fiscal year runs from July 1st to June 30th. It's much like a school year, not like a calendar year. You apply once every year through the provider and just renew on an annual basis. Like I said, the funding amount is based on the disability category, which are all listed here on the screen. If a student starts later in the fiscal year, if the application is done after July 1st, their award amount is prorated. And when a scholarship is accepted, the the public school district is no longer responsible for providing FAPE, which is the law that entitles every student to a free and appropriate public education. And I think the best way to explain this is the scholarship amounts are definitive. You can spend as much money on intervention and therapies as your scholarship allows, and that's all done through your provider. A school district, there is no maximum. With a school district, there is no maximum. The school district would have to provide your student with all of the support that he or she needs that's detailed in that IEP, and there's no maximum amount. With the scholarship, FAPE is waived because there is a maximum amount, and there is a chance that your child needs more support than this. But from what I've found, families are pretty happy with the services that they're able to get with these scholarship funds. So don't let that scare you, but it is something to consider. So we have information here now about the 2 scholarships, the Ed Choice scholarships that are available to homeschool students and really benefit students in the home environment. So the John Peterson Special Needs Scholarship, or JPSN scholarship, is for students with all disability categories, as long as they have an ETR and IEP, which you can request. Of course, we just went over that. It's open for students in kindergarten through 18 years old. And John Peterson scholarship students in 3rd grade and up are required to take state tests. These are proctored by your provider. It's very low stakes, low pressure proctoring of these tests. And the results have no impact on your funds or your eligibility. It's really just a box that needs checked that it's completed. The Autism Scholarship requires an ETR and IEP in which your child qualifies for special education services under the disability category of autism or developmental delay. The exception I mentioned earlier with students with autism is that if your child has a medical diagnosis of autism, they can request an AEP. And this is an autism education plan. So you do not have to go through the ETR and IEP process with an AEP. It essentially is similar, but it allows the provider that you're working with to outline the goals, the goal areas in which your child will receive services for. The Autism Scholarship is open for students in pre-K through 18 years old, and there is no state testing requirement. I'll pause for a second. We'll see if there's any questions. Okay.
No other ones have come through yet.
Okay. Very good. All right. Awesome. So I want to bring your attention to this age eligibility. Some of you may be familiar with public school special education services where students can stay enrolled and receive services up until they turn 22 years old. But when a home educated student turns 18, they can finish out that current year on their scholarship. They will not be eligible to renew for the next fiscal year. So this has put a lot of families in a really tough spot. Their scholarship funding has stopped for their student in 11th or 12th grade. I have families who their child was held back in public school in elementary school, and now they have a student who's in 11th grade and going to turn 18, and their funding will stop. So many companies, mine included, and advocate organizations like the Autism Society, are encouraging parents to send letters to their state representatives to push for the legislative change that will expand access to the scholarship for students who are 18 to 22. So we have some templates available. I was actually working on some when Teresa emailed me about this, so it was very timely. So we'd like to share those with you as well so that you can help us be change makers in this area. So
Nichole, I do have a question from the chat, but one I wanted to follow up about this. Do you have, if you have a link to the template, or if you want to send it to me after, I'm happy to email that out to families too.
that would be great. Yes, we'll do that. I will also add it to my website, which I can give you the link to at the end. I think it's on my last slide, but yes, I think that would be great.
And then do folks have any other choice when they turn 18 and they're in 11th grade for funding?
Not many. No.
Okay.
If they are working with their county board of developmental disabilities, it's possible to get some assistance and take part in the programming that they have. But as far as something equitable to the Ed Choice Scholarship, there's really nothing for the kids in the older age bracket.
Okay.
I
And then I do have,
oh, go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, I
I
have a
do
question
have
in
some
the
other
chat.
funding options, just to talk about that, are for students in homeschool settings and sometimes in public school as well. And those include Learning Aid Ohio and Elevate DD, which are really great programs that don't have quite as many stipulations as the scholarship, but the funding levels are a lot lower, but it can still be beneficial. There's also ACE Ohio, which I was just talking to someone a little while ago, and the subscription to that funding has been used. They have a full student caseload right now, and I don't believe they're doing any renewals. So that one might be off the table. But these other ones are really great ones to check out as well. I'm not an expert on them, but I do have some families who use this even in conjunction with the scholarship, which is really nice.
I've got a couple questions that came in. First, how do you request for an AEP?
Awesome. So when you request for an AEP, you send a very similar letter, and I can give you a template for that as well. And you just explain your situation. This is my medical diagnosis. You don't have to share the diagnosis with them in that letter. That can be in a follow-up conversation, because you'll have to meet with probably a school psychologist or the director of special education at the public school. But you just send a letter saying, I have a medical diagnosis for my child with autism, and I would like to request an AEP. And that's it. There is no legal timeline for AEPs, so sometimes they can be put off for months, which is unfortunate. It seems like kind of this fast track way to get these services. However, there's no legal timeline with Ohio or federal laws, so it can actually take just as long. So it's a nice option though. And a lot of families use the AEP because maybe their ETR, maybe they got the ETR and their student has been identified with multiple disabilities or emotional disturbance or other health impairment, and they're not giving you the autism diagnosis that you, and really those funds with an autism diagnosis are much higher. You can see here on the screen. So if you're not getting the disability category that you want with the ETR process, you can always go the AEP route once that's completed.
And she just asked a clarifying question, so we need to request the AEP from the public school.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
And you work with a provider to do that. I haven't heard of many situations other than with these Ed Choice Scholarship to where an AEP would apply to. So that would be something where you could actually contact a provider first and they can assist you in that advocacy role in requesting that.
Another question, I am considering homeschooling. Just for clarification, my child has an ETR disability category other than autism, but was later medical diagnosed with autism. The medical diagnosis was noted in the recent ETR, but the category did not change. Would I need to request an AEP instead?
Yes, yes, it would be best to do that because your award amount would be much greater, depending on what that initial, you know, identifying category was in their ETR. If the award amount varies greatly, it would benefit you to request the AEP. And in that case, I would suggest, you know, getting in contact with a provider and doing that in collaboration with them.
Another question, if the changes go into process with the Department of Education going to the state level, does any of this change?
So that is a great question that I think we would all love some answers to. Providers, public schools, private schools, anything that's funded through the Department of Education and Workforce. I think all of those people are on the edge of their seat right now. We're seeing in Ohio that Governor DeWine is actually opening up the Ed Choice options and reinforcing those, which I think is really positive. This is a state-funded program. However, there is the potential for it to be impacted with changes at the federal level. So we're all just kind of waiting on that to see what happens. But I'm hopeful that they may be insignificant and not, you know, just take away funding or something like that for this program. I don't think that's going to happen. There's been a lot of chat between providers about this, and we're pretty hopeful that there's not going to be many significant changes to funding.
I think those were the main questions that have come in so far. I know some were submitted in advance and probably some you kind of addressed
Yes, I
throughout your
tried to make sure I
presentation.
addressed all of them along the way. So
Perfect. If anybody submitted one before and they still want clarification, definitely feel free to take yourself off mute or comment in the chat and we can get further clarification for you. Um,
absolutely. Here's my email as well, my phone number, and my website, which is just homelearningpartners.org. I'm going to put the templates up to those letters as well. So that you can grab those. I know the Autism Society has some available too. Are those on your guys' website?
they're on our social media,
They're
yeah.
on your social media. Okay, great.
Yeah. And I think I heard you address this. I was kind of navigating technology, but another question, considering homeschooling, can you explain how to obtain related services such as speech therapy? I just want to confirm the person who asked that got their question answered too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll go back to this slide where after you request the IEP and ETR, you know that your child was found eligible. You can reach out to a provider. Now, you want to ask those providers questions. If you know that your child has a communication deficit, a speech and language deficit, expressive receptive communication, something like that, you want to find a provider who has speech and language therapists as a specialist that they offer. So that is just part of the process of finding a provider. Once you apply and are awarded that, that scholarship, then you can schedule those services. So it can be anything from transition to adulthood, art therapy, music therapy. I've seen all kinds of things. Those are obviously less common among providers, but intervention for academics is a big one, which really just looks like tutoring sessions. Behavior specialist is also with a BCBA is a big one. They can write a behavior plan and work on behavior intervention with the family. Whether it's in person, online, any of these that work for you, different providers offer different things. So it's important to ask questions. If you wait until your child's IEP is written, then you know exactly what's in Section 7. If you can kind of glean information off of that ETR, a provider will be able to help you with that as well. Be able to understand what services will ultimately be put in the IEP. You can kind of get a head start on securing those services, and then once your award comes, you can schedule them.
Another question came through, does anyone have suggestions for providers in Lake County?
Good question. So, providers can service anyone in the state, which is a really great thing. For some providers, they have one office and stick to one area. So they might stick to Akron, Ohio, and that's it. However, they can potentially provide services for kids throughout the state. So the scholarship office, if you search the John Peterson Scholarship or the Autism Scholarship with ODE, they have a provider search tool. And you can actually search for a provider based on the services you're looking for. So like I said earlier, my child has expressive and receptive communication deficit. So I know they're going to need speech therapy, and that's my priority. We might do a little academic intervention as well, but my priority is speech therapy. So I could get on the provider search tool on the ODE website, type in my county or select Lake County, click on the services that I'm looking for, speech and language pathology, and search that way. And it's a pretty good system that they have. They'll share all of the contact information, and if those providers have a website, they can search that as well. And sometimes if you're open to virtual services, you might have a little more options in which providers you go with. Because I work with kids that live 2 hours away from me. I have a great relationship with them. I've worked with them for a couple of years, and it's created a really nice bond, and I try to do some in-person stuff with them throughout the year. But, those virtual services are really great for people who maybe can't find an in-person therapist to work with their child.
And I did put that link in the chat to the search tool for autism
Yes, that's
scholarship
great.
providers.
And you're so welcome, Ashley. This is something I just love doing, and I've kind of built this business around it to be able to do it. So
I have a question. If I can chime in, I think it'll be easier than typing it.
yeah.
How do I go about finding a co-op or network like you were talking about that I feel like a lot of homeschooling is foundational in faith or some sort of religion, I wanted to find something that's secular. How do I go about that?
Yes. So I think the most powerful tool is Facebook at this point in time. I have found so many groups that you can even just ask these questions on. And there are parents that have been homeschooling for a decade or two with multiple children who can point you in the right direction. Little ones that aren't going to be too far from home. And then there's bigger ones that maybe span a few counties and they do things. I have this one parent I just adore. She has a field trip group. It's very secular and they plan field trips all across the state, mostly in Northeast and North Central Ohio, but they're planning field trips every week, all around. And you can join groups like that. And I can share, it's called Homeschool Voyages, her group. Really amazing parents involved, but lots of different things like that where Facebook connects people and just they're able to find these little groups that are maybe only 10 different children, but it gives them access to the socialization, the learning experiences, maybe shared learning or like a co-op setting where you have different people teaching each week or each month, if that's something that you're looking for.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome. And I see another question in chat. If a provider has tuition fees of $36,000 and then the scholarship only covers $32,000, can you look for additional scholarships to help with the balance? And yes, there's some programs. So I'll just kind of say this about providers' tuition. So if you're looking at a private school, there's most likely going to be the fees listed as tuition. And that's like an annual tuition. So in that case, yes, you use the $32,000 that you're given through the scholarship that goes directly to the provider. They bill monthly for that. The way it's set up, they would bill monthly for those fees. And then you can find outside funding to cover the rest of tuition. And most private schools can point you in the direction. A lot of them have different voucher programs that can bring those tuition amounts down to that $32,000 so that it's accessible just with the scholarship. Now, if you're looking for a provider that provides some therapy sessions throughout each week, and maybe even some academic intervention sessions throughout each week, your child's not attending anywhere. They're essentially just taking part in these learning sessions with different specialists throughout the week. There are hourly fees. There's no like tuition for those providers. And then the hourly fees are, your schedule is built around what the award amount can do for your child. So some students can receive 30 hours of intervention and therapy a month. Others, it might be 15. It just depends on their hourly fees, and all providers are required to publish those. They're all available on the Ohio Department of Education website. When you're looking for providers, you'll be able to see those. You'll be able to look through that and see that. They have handbooks available so you can kind of get to know them even before you talk to them, just to get a feel for what you're dealing with and what kind of provider this might be. But that's how it works. So if it's a private school or some sort of day program, it would have a tuition fee. Otherwise, it's really just an hourly fee and your schedule is built around your monthly budget for the scholarship.
Any other questions? Well, thank you. Oh, here's one more that came through. When we attended one open house, they mentioned since the autism scholarship is up to 32,000, all families would pay something. So I didn't ask if they have additional scholarships. And yes, it's a private school.
Yeah, I would ask if they have a voucher program or a financial aid program. A lot of private schools do. There's nothing through the Department of Education that will cover the extra cost. Sometimes you can find things through your county that provide like a grant. It's like a grant that you don't have to pay back for special education students. Um, but the schools usually have access to information to help families with either financial aid or like a voucher. It's a good question.
Well, thank you so much, Nichole, for this presentation. I think everybody has gotten some little tidbits that are going to be helpful to them on their journey. And I just want to really thank you for doing this, because I think this is definitely a question that families have, and you provided a lot of clarity today. So I know your contact information is here, and I'm sure families can reach out to you if they have further questions about this after we end the event today.
Absolutely. Yes. Give me a call or send me an email. I'd be happy to chat, whether it's about getting started in homeschooling or accessing the scholarship for your kiddos. So you're so welcome.
Perfect.
Thank you guys for having me.